The rugged spine of Montana hides Glacier National Park, one of the planet's last places where ancient alpine glaciers still carve cirque lakes and sharpen jagged peaks. Do you know that Yellowstone National Park, which spills into Montana, contains over half of the world's geysers and sits above a supervolcano the size of Rhode Island? Yellowstone shelters the planet's largest caldera and the densest cluster of geysers on Earth, a volcanic heart that still breathes beneath Montana's prairies. Do you know that Yellowstone's Grand Prismatic Spring is the third largest hot spring in the world and owes its fiery colors to heat-loving microbes that paint concentric bands? Steam and mineral-laced runoff carve otherworldly terraces at Mammoth Hot Springs, where limestone has been sculpted into delicate castings over millennia. Bison, elk, and wolves roam a mosaic of thermal basins and alpine meadows, and their migratory patterns have been shaped by geothermal refuges since the Ice Age. Under the surface, a simmering magma chamber generates earth-shaking geyser eruptions, invisible forces that dictate the park's pulse and surprise even seasoned geologists. Hikers on the Lamar Valley at dawn may witness wolves slipping through golden grasses while steam from nearby vents blurs the horizon like watercolor. The Norris Geyser Basin shifts on geological timescales, with vents switching allegiance from one pool to another, rewriting the thermal map within years. Yellowstone's rivers and lakes mirror this volatility. Thermal inputs raise temperatures and alter fish habitats, creating micro-ecosystems found almost nowhere else. Dark winter nights reveal a sky unpolluted by city lights, and under that vault, the geysers and pools glow like a terrestrial galaxy, hinting at the park's primeval origin. Every spring, the thermal soils feed a floral palette of rare mosses and grasses that appear and vanish, with the park's subtle hydrothermal rhythms. Researchers still discover new microbial species in Yellowstone's extreme environments, organisms that might rewrite our understanding of life's adaptability. Visitors who tread the boardwalk soon realize the landscape is part laboratory, part cathedral, an ecosystem where chemistry, heat, and life co-author every tableau. It is here that science, culture, and folklore collide in living landscapes daily. Big Sky Resort sprawls across nearly 6,000 skiable acres, carving a wild, high-altitude playground beneath the peak called Lone Mountain. Do you know Lone Peak's summit reaches 11,166 feet, and its vertical drop can top 4,000 feet, creating some of the continent's most dramatic descents? Its bowls and chutes collect rare, dense powder that often exceeds 300 inches each winter. making steep faces and backcountry gaits legendary. Hidden glades and secret couloirs lured early ski explorers and still reward those who chase unmarked lines. Just a short drive from the rim of Yellowstone National Park, Big Sky's open ridgelines merge into landscapes where elk, bighorn sheep, and wolves move through the same slopes. Skiing here can feel less like a resort experience and more like passing through a living alpine ecosystem. That blend of professional safety and old-school discovery is why many veteran mountaineers still call Big Sky a modern frontier. Lodges cluster into cozy villages where dark sky nights give way to blazing stars, and rustic luxury meets hearty mountain-honed cuisine. Après-ski conversations easily turn to wolf sightings, avalanche lore, and plans for the next day's first treks. From Big Sky's high trails, the landscape funnels toward the Bridger Range and Bozeman's cultural lift, a contrast of remote peaks and vibrant town life. That contrast is what keeps visitors lingering. Pristine mountain solitude by day, a lively community by night. But beneath the postcard panoramas are stories few expect, of indigenous trails, winter rescues, and geology that shaped these slopes over millennia. Stay with us, and we'll trace the hidden paths from Big Sky's summit ridgelines down into the valleys where Montana's deeper secrets unfold. Flathead Lake is the largest natural freshwater lake west of the Mississippi, its mirror-like surface stretching for nearly 30 miles across the Flathead Valley. Do you know Flathead Lake hosts more than 50 islands, including Wild Horse Island, where horses still roam, and ancient buffalo jump sites, whisper of native history. The lake's unusually clear, cold waters support rare native fish like the kootenai whitefish and draw anglers chasing trophy trout. From its pebbled shores, mountain ridges rise into the Bob Marshall Wilderness, and the silhouette of Glacier National Park promises a colder, wilder world uphill. Boating across Flathead feels like sliding between worlds, where citrus blue water meets forests that drip into the lake's edge. Those fragile habitats remind visitors that Flathead's clarity isn't just scenic. It's the result of protected headwaters and ongoing conservation that link back to the peaks where water is born. In the evening, sturgeon sky reflections blur the boundary between lake and sky and invite one last question about where the shoreline ends and the wilderness begins. Follow that question north, past the lake's outlet at Flathead River, and you'll find glaciers' sculpted valleys answering in ancient ice and granite. Explorers who trace that water's path discover small reservoirs of history, mission cabins, timber mills, and tribal gathering places that stitch human stories to the landscape. By following Flathead Lake from shoreline to skyline, you trace a living atlas where each inlet leads naturally to the next wild chapter. And nowhere is that more visible than where the lake hands the landscape to Glacier National Park. Lee Metcalf Wilderness Area holds one of the most continuous subalpine to riparian landscapes left in the continental United States. Do you know Lee Metcalf shelters hidden cirque lakes that feed crystal clear freestone streams coveted by native cutthroat trout? Granite ridgelines rise above benches of alpine meadows, where a riot of lupine and paintbrush colors the short summer. These meadows act like living carpets that nurse elk calves and sustain high-elevation pollinators for weeks each year. In spring, meltwater threads down steep gullies, creating waterfalls that carve ancient glacial valleys into sculpted amphitheaters. Old-growth subalpine fir and Engelmann spruce cling to north-facing slopes, forming cool refuges during summer heat waves. You can trace animal highways here, narrow routes used by bears, mountain lions, and wolverines moving between summer range and winter forest. Those corridors link Lee Metcalf to the greater Bitterroot complex, making it essential for genetic exchange among large carnivores. Hikers follow faint trails that thread over talus fields and past tarns that mirror the sky, feeling like they've stepped into another epoch. Fishermen who know the waters chase wild cutthroat and bull trout in streams that have avoided heavy stocking and kept ancient behaviors. Here, focus on preserving seasonal flows and intake habitat, so the area can continue its role as a climate refuge. That protection matters not just for charisma species, but for the tiny alpine plants and cold water insects that underwrite the ecosystem. Stand in a saddle at dawn, and you can watch fog drain from the valleys, a slow exhale of the mountains that resets the landscape. Each path you take links to the next wild parcel, a reminder that Lee Metcalf is a stitched piece of a much larger wilderness quilt. Photographers search for the delicate rim light on snowfields that linger well into July, an unexpected winter memory. Researchers pack into remote basins to monitor stream temperatures and track shifts in species ranges over decades. Even small actions matter here. Leave no-trace camping and careful angling keep these valleys resilient for future seasons. Local stewards and federal managers coordinate to balance public access with the quiet the wild species need to thrive. By connecting each ridge and creek you traverse, Lee Metcalf invites a different kind of discovery, one that measures worth in continuity rather than conquest. Keep walking, and you'll understand why protecting this singular mountain tapestry is central to Montana's wild heart. This peak guards one of the few remaining intact riparian corridors in the United States, where summer elk migrations cross within sight of an urban skyline at Mount Sentinel. Do you know Mount Sentinel's white M has watched over Missoula since 1908 and perches on ridgelines hollowed by the cataclysmic glacial Lake Missoula floods? Hikers begin where the city ends, ascending trails that reveal fossil-rich limestone and pockets of plants found nowhere else in America. Beneath your boots are remnants of an inland sea and ancient shorelines that link this single summit to the Rocky Mountains' deeper story. At the ridge's crest, the view pivots from downtown rooftops to jagged peaks and the braided Clark Fork River, threading the valley below. That river's course was sculpted by the same megafloods that spilled from glacial Lake Missoula, making this panorama a live history lesson, visible only in a few places worldwide. Local students maintain the white M each spring, a ritual that turns a university emblem into a living landmark that birds and bighorn sheep share. The annual upkeep hides a stranger secret. The slope is also a migratory corridor for raptors and a stopover for species-shifting ranges as the climate warms. From Mount Sentinel, you can trace a line to the Rattlesnake Wilderness, where quieter trails protect old-growth pockets and basalt outcrops echo with the same geological forces. Walk east, and the terrain softens into cottonwood galleries along the Clark Fork, a transition zone where urban conservation efforts meet wild country. Photographers climb at golden hour because the light reveals phantom ridgelines and fossil imprints that turn casual strolls into unexpected archaeology. Evidence of ancient creatures and sudden floods still lies exposed, turning hikes into detective work for anyone curious enough to look closely. At night, the M becomes a quiet beacon, while by day, the slopes host secret meadows of sun-loving wildflowers that botanists prize. Those flowers cling to thin soils atop limestone shelves, surviving where other plants cannot, and offering genetic microcosms important to conservation science. Understanding Mount Sentinel means following ridgelines outward, past suburban edges into alpine basins, where the story of Montana's water and wildlife unfolded. Stay with this slope, and we'll trace the path from the M to river, wilderness, and peak, revealing how one small city sentinel links to the vast wild of Montana. The Beartooth Highway clings to the cathedral-like rim of the Beartooth Plateau, rising to 10,947 feet at Beartooth Pass. This nearly 68-mile ribbon of asphalt threads glacial basins, alpine tundra, and mirror-like lakes above the tree line. Snowfields linger here into July, sculpting unexpected winter white contrasts against summer wildflowers. Lofty summits pierce the horizon and create a skyline more commonly seen in polar landscapes than in the American West. Drivers navigate a series of hairpin switchbacks that reveal new, jaw-dropping panoramas at every turn. The highway's remoteness amplifies its drama, with each overlook feeling like an unclaimed postcard of the planet's high country. Beartooth is home to an astonishing concentration of alpine lakes, many fed by ancient glaciers and rimmed by talus slopes. Island Lake and Beartooth Lake glitter like polished gemstones, reflecting serrated peaks that have stood for millennia. Bighorn sheep and mountain goats patrol the ledges, appearing unexpectedly where the road threads narrow passes. Their white coats and sure-footed grace turn casual stops into encounters with wild, living sculptures. Geology here reads like a history book, with exposed Precambrian rocks more than 3 billion years old. Locals mark the thaw with pilgrimages, rolling into town like an annual reverent procession of explorers. Beyond the pass, the Beartooth Highway funnels into high plateaus that seem to hover above the ordinary world. Those plateaus then slip downhill toward the Yellowstone frontier, carrying travelers from alpine desolation into steaming geothermal country. Few drives combine raw geology, fragile tundra, and cinematic scale in such concentrated miles. For anyone seeking an experience that feels simultaneously ancient and immediate, this ribbon of road delivers without compromise. But the Beartooth's true secret lies in the small moments: a lone marmot atop a boulder, or a sudden cloud shadow chase on the valley floor. Those fleeting, human-scale dramas are what make the highway more than a scenic route. They make it a pilgrimage. Drive slowly, stop often, and let the landscape rearrange your sense of scale and time. When you descend toward the Yellowstone gates, you carry with you a high country memory that reshapes how the West feels forever. High in Glacier National Park sits Triple Divide Peak, the only place in the United States where a single raindrop can journey to 3 different oceans. Do you know that Triple Divide Peak shares a geological story with the gold-bearing streams that birthed Virginia City and Alder Gulch? Virginia City exploded into being in 1863 after prospectors struck one of the richest placer deposits in the Rocky Mountains. Within weeks, wooden buildings, saloons, and claim shacks sprouted along a narrow main street that still survives today. Walk that main street, and the town feels like a living chapter from the 19th century, complete with creaking sidewalks and cast-iron storefronts. Every storefront has a story of a miner, a claim dispute, or a saloon brawl, and actors keep those stories breathing. Unlike vanished boom camps, Virginia City became a National Historic Landmark District, preserved instead of erased. That preservation means you can stand where vigilante justice once met frontier law and still sense the tension that shaped Montana territory. The town connects directly to nearby Bannock and the wider Alder Gulch corridor. Each site a stopped clock in mining time. Travelers move from Bannock's lonely streets to Virginia City's bustling reenactments, tracing the migration of miners and money across the hills. Virginia City was also briefly the territorial capital, and that political pulse explains why Helena, and later Butte, rose as centers of power. The gold of Alder Gulch seeded towns, rail lines, and bitter rivalries that shaped Montana's map for generations. Inside curtained parlors, you'll hear tales of hydraulic mining and sluice boxes, tools that turned creeks into fortunes and wisdom. Local guides explain how a single pan of black sand could change a life overnight and sometimes ruin many more. The living museum aspect is more than costumes. It's a chain-linking landscape, industry, and people across time. As you leave Virginia City toward the Missouri headwaters or the Continental Divide, the geology that fed those creeks reappears in jagged ridgelines. Every step out of town is an opportunity to follow an old miner's path to a ghost claim or a hidden creek. Those paths connect Virginia City to glaciers, alpine basins, and the strange hydrological fate of Triple Divide Peak, where water and history both choose their course. Flathead National Forest harbors one of the last intact western larch ecosystems on Earth, with ancient trees surviving wildfires for centuries. Do you know Flathead National Forest forms a living bridge between Glacier National Park and the Bob Marshall Wilderness, enabling wide-ranging animals to migrate across vast tracts of fouled land? Sprawling over roughly 2.4 million acres, its mosaic of alpine ridges, old-growth forests, and glacial valleys reads like a natural archive of Ice Age geology. Rivers such as the North and Middle Forks of the Flathead carve through these valleys, sustaining cold water fisheries and riparian corridors that anchor the landscape. In spring, meadows spill with native wildflowers and subalpine wetlands, where migratory birds pause before pushing farther into the Rockies. The mosaic of habitats supports grizzly bears, elk herds, wolverines, and the rare whitebark pine, a species critical to high-elevation food webs. Hikers and anglers find hidden lakes rimmed with crystalline water, while backcountry trails lead to glacier-polished cirques that still hold permanent snowfields. The silence here is not emptiness, but the hum of ecosystems interacting over millennia, a complex conversation mapped in soil, stone, and stream. The choices made to protect or fragment this forest will decide whether the wild bridge between parks remains intact for generations to come. In Flathead's quiet coves, you can still witness birth and renewal, newborn elk, spawning trout, and the first shoots of fire-prompted regeneration. Each of those small moments accumulates into the large story of survival that binds ecosystems from valley bottom to Alpine ridge. Visiting here is less about ticking a checklist and more about observing the slow mechanics of wilderness, keeping itself alive. Stay with us as we cross the next wild seam into Glacier National Park, where ice-carved peaks reveal the other half of this living corridor. One of the last intact temperate glaciers in the lower 48 still clings to high cirques above Glacier National Park in Montana. Do you know Glacier National Park in Montana once sheltered over 150 active glaciers and now counts fewer than 30? Making it a frontline story of climate change and geological memory. From serrated ridgelines carved by ice to emerald lakes that mirror impossible cliffs, the park holds landscapes older than many civilizations. Hidden beneath those cliffs are ancient tree stumps and peat deposits that scientists use to read the park's vanished climates and the glacier's retreat over millennia. The Continental Divide runs like a spine through the park, splitting waters so that a single raindrop can head toward the Atlantic or the Pacific. That divide ties Glacier to Waterton Lakes across the border, forming the world's first international peace park and a cross-border wilderness corridor for grizzly bears and mountain goats. Drive the Going to the Sun Road, and you move through time, from valley-bottom cedar forests up into tundra, where rare alpine plants cling to thin soil and short summers. Every ridge in Glacier is a story of motion, of ice carving rock, of rivers rearranging valleys, and of humans following wildlife trails that became wagon roads and then scenic byways. From park rangers mapping changing glaciers to indigenous communities who read the land's signs for generations, Glacier contains layers of human and natural history entwined. In the shadows of those vanishing glaciers, the question becomes urgent. How will this landscape change in our children's lifetimes, and what parts can we still protect? Stay with us as we trace the meltwater from higher cirques down through alpine meadows, into river canyons, and out into the broader wilds of Montana, where each place depends on the next. We will visit the hidden cirques where ice still grinds stone, then follow the streams that feed ancient wetlands and the communities downstream. What you will see is not only a park of mountains and lakes, but a dynamic, vulnerable system where every peak and valley tells a crucial, ongoing story. Bighorn Canyon National Recreation Area carves a raw, vertical corridor through limestone and sandstone, its cliffs plunging nearly 1,000 feet above a glassy ribbon of water. The reservoir behind Yellowtail Dam stretches for dozens of miles, hugging steep walls and revealing unexpected hidden coves and unique microhabitats where desert and river life collide. Boat trips feel like time travel, sliding beneath prehistoric rock layers while bald eagles wheel overhead and bighorn sheep pick impossible ledges. Along the shoreline, petroglyphs and fragile archaeological sites whisper of Crow and Shoshone presence, binding cultural history to the canyon's geological story. Trailheads, such as Horseshoe Bend and Lyons Trail, thread from riparian cottonwoods up into dry benches that open onto broad canyon rims. From those heights, you can watch the canyon funnel toward the Pryor Mountains, where wild mustangs and jagged limestone spires extend the landscape's drama into neighboring highlands. In winter, the canyon's muted palette sharpens, exposing mineral streaks on cliffs and concentrating wildlife around thermal springs and the narrower river corridors. Spring floods sculpt new shorelines as migratory birds fill the marshes and cottonwoods erupt into green, making the waterline pulse with life. Rangers and small visitor centers point toward quiet overlooks and explain the canyon's delicate balance, while also cautioning about deceptive heat and sudden storms. Kayaking here transforms perspective. Paddlers slip into slot-like passages, then emerge into wide basins and feel the canyon's scale with every silent sweep. Bighorn Canyon's connected ecosystems, from vertical cliff face to riparian corridor to nearby prairie, form wildlife highways for elk, mule deer, and predators roaming toward adjacent public lands. Following those animal paths leads naturally into the broader wilds of northern Wyoming and southern Montana, inviting travelers to continue onward, where each new ridge reveals another chapter in this shared, rugged landscape. Only a handful of mountain passes in North America maintain an uninterrupted glacial corridor, like Marias Pass in Montana. Do you know Marias Pass is the lowest crossing of the Continental Divide in the northern Rockies, a secret rail gateway that tames jagged peaks? Hidden between the Livingston and Lewis ranges, the pass threads a thin sunlit ribbon through ancient ice-scoured valleys. Winter here sculpts the ridgelines into corniced silhouettes, while summer opens fragrant subalpine meadows that feed rivers downstream. It was John F. Stevens's surveys in the late 1880s that convinced rail engineers to push the Great Northern Railway through this narrow notch. Today, freight trains and Amtrak's Empire Builder still trace that same steel, linking prairie towns on the plains to Glacier National Park's alpine heart. From the pass, the view spills east to the rolling wheatlands and west toward the jagged skyline of Glacier's high country. Seasonal storms funnel through this funnel, carving snowfields that sustain cold water streams and the native trout populations below. Wildlife uses the corridor as well, with elk herds dropping from high slopes to graze the sheltered valleys in fall. Photographers chase the late light that compresses ridgelines into ribbons, while train spotters wait for the thunderous arrival of a freight across the divide. Listening closely, you can hear how this place compresses centuries into a single sound: wind, steel, and whispered conifer needles. As the camera pulls away from the pass, the route unwinds into the valleys leading to Browning, Cut Bank, and the glacier-carved bowls of Glacier National Park. Each town and trailhead linked by Marias Pass carries a thread of Montana's larger story of mobility, survival, and the surprising corridors nature carved for us. There is, beneath the polished rails and roadside markers, a quieter truth. Marias Pass is both a passage and a keeper of time. Follow it, and you'll discover how one narrow notch shapes the landscape, the wildlife, and the human routes across an interregion. Montana's stretch of the Missouri River is one of the longest free-flowing reaches in the continental United States, carving a corridor of cottonwood forests and fossil-rich badlands. Do you know the river that begins at Three Forks once carried steamboats as far upriver as Fort Benton, earning it the nickname the world's innermost sea in the 19th century? From the headwaters, the Missouri gathers strength, fed by clear mountain streams and rolling prairie runoff that give it a color and pulse unique among American rivers. Lewis and Clark followed this exact ribbon of water, mapping rapids, trading with tribes, and marking places like the dramatic Great Falls, where the river tumbles through narrow channels. Human hands have altered its flow with dams and levees, but the river still keeps surprising scientists with pockets of wild habitat and rare fish like pallid sturgeon. As it continues east, the Missouri hands the landscape off to the Dakotas, but its Montana section remains a stitched sequence of headwaters, falls, breaks, and reservoirs. Follow that thread, and you move from crystalline springs to fossil beds, to bustling river towns, each place feeding the next with water, history, and mystery. Next, we'll trace how those mysteries surface in small canyons and museum displays, and why the Missouri's Montana chapter still feels like an unfinished story. At Triple Divide Peak, the same raindrop could begin a journey to the Pacific, the Atlantic, and the Arctic, and that strange crossroads quietly defines Montana's water and life. From those glacier-fed rivers, the story flows outward, carving alpine lakes in Glacier National Park and feeding the willow-studded banks of the Missouri, linking mountain ice to wide prairie scontfoy. Walk the ridge above Flathead Lake and you feel the continent's spine. Then follow the valleys south and the land opens into the Beartooth Highway, where granite plates tilt into skies only the bold have measured. Turn east and the high country unravels into the Yellowstone fringes, where geothermal heat meets ancient forests and the same corridors that move bison and grizzly bears knit mountain to plain. The plains remember different histories. The rolling grass converges on Little Bighorn, a place of layered memory that connects to the river trails that fur traders once followed all the way down to the Missouri Breaks. Those breaks are not empty spaces but living scars of water and wind, home to cliff-living eagles, secret caves and stories that reach back into the maps drawn by indigenous peoples long before state lines existed. Every highway, trail, and river here acts like a handoff in a relay. Glacier, melt to trout stream, ridge to prairie, battlefield to modern town. So when you move from one place to the next, you are reading the next paragraph of the same epic. By the time the journey closes, you realize Montana isn't a series of isolated postcards, but a single living atlas where geological oddities, hidden lakes, and centuries of human stories fold into one another. Keep the memory of Triple Divide Peak, the hush of Glacier's cirques, the roar of Yellowstone's edges, and the soft wind over the plains, and you'll carry a map that changes every time you look at it. If you leave with one desire, let it be to go back and follow one thread farther. Trace a river to its source. Climb one more pass. Listen longer to the people who call this place home. And discover the next quietly unbelievable thing Montana has decided to hide in plain sight. Because here, the land keeps revealing itself in pieces, and every return writes a new sentence into a story that is still, even now, being shaped.